A reading from the book of the prophet Daniel. In those days, the assembly condemned Susanna to death. Then Susanna cried out with a loud voice and said, "O eternal God, who discern what is secret, who are aware of all things before they come to be, you know that these men have borne false witness against me, and now I am to die. Yet I have done none of the things that they have wickedly invented against me." The Lord heard her cry, and as she was being led away to be put to death, God aroused the Holy Spirit of a young lad named Daniel, and he cried with a loud voice, "I am innocent of the blood of this woman." All the people turned to him and said, "What is this you have said?" Taking a stand in the midst of them, he said, "Are you such fools, you sons of Israel? Have you condemned a daughter of Israel without examination and without learning the facts? Return to the place of judgment, for these men have borne false witness against her." Then all the people returned in haste, and the elders said to him, "Come, sit among us and inform us, for God has given you that right." And Daniel said to them, "Separate them far from each other, and I will examine them." When they were separated from each other, he summoned one of them and said to him, "You old relic of wicked days, your sins have now come home, which you have committed in the past, pronouncing unjust judgments, condemning the innocent and letting the guilty go free, though the Lord said, 'Do not put to death an innocent and righteous person.' Now then, if you really saw her, tell me this, under what tree did you see them being intimate with each other?" He answered, "Under a mastic tree." And Daniel said, "Very well, you have lied against your own head, for the angel of God has received the sentence from God and will immediately cut you in two." Then he put him aside and commanded them to bring the other. And he said, "You offspring of Canaan and not of Judah, beauty has deceived you and lust has perverted your heart. This is how you both have been dealing with the daughters of Israel, and they were intimate with you through fear. But a daughter of Judah would not endure your wickedness. Now then, tell me, under what tree did you catch them being intimate with each other?" He answered, "Under an evergreen oak." And Daniel said to him, "Very well, you also have lied against your own head, for the angel of God is waiting with his sword to saw you in two, that he may destroy you both." Then all the assembly shouted loudly and blessed God, who saves those who hope in him. And they rose against the two elders, for out of their own mouths Daniel had convicted them of bearing false witness, and they did to them as they had wickedly planned to do to their neighbor. Acting in accordance with the law of Moses, they put them to death. Thus innocent blood was saved that day. The word of the Lord.
If I should walk in the valley of darkness, no evil would I fear.
If I should walk in the valley of darkness, no evil would I fear.
The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. Fresh and green are the pastures where he gives me repose. Near restful waters he leads me, to revive my drooping spirit.
If I should walk in the valley of darkness, no evil would I fear.
He guides me along the right path, he is true to his name. If I should walk in the valley of darkness, no evil would I fear. You are there with your crook and your staff. With these you give me comfort. You have prepared a banquet for me in the sight of my foes. My head you have anointed with oil. My cup is overflowing. If I should walk in the valley of darkness, no evil would I fear. Surely goodness and kindness shall follow me all the days of my life. In the Lord's own house shall I dwell forever and ever. If I should walk in the valley of darkness, no evil would I fear. Praise to you, O Christ, King of eternal glory. Praise to you, O Christ, King of eternal glory. Now is the favorable time. This is the day of salvation. Praise to you, O Christ, King of eternal glory.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. At that time, Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning he came again to the temple, and the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in their midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law Moses commanded us to stone such. What do you say about her?" This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away, one by one, beginning with the eldest. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus looked up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and do not sin again." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
What was Jesus writing in the dust? Some of the early fathers said that he was writing down the sins of all her accusers. You know, Joshua, I know what you were up to last Wednesday. Some modern commentators suggest rather that what Jesus is doing is slowing the action down so that the mob diffuses its anger. But I think we just don't know. And that's the point. John doesn't want us to know what Jesus was writing. Let us go back a little bit. Both the readings are about entrapment, imprisonment. Susanna she shouts out, "I am trapped in this walled garden." And in the Gospel, we see how this woman was trapped in the act of adultery. She's made captive. She's dragged before Jesus. And she's just really the cheese in the mousetrap trying to trap Jesus himself. And of course, the mob, the lynch mob, they are themselves in a way trapped in their thirst for violence, first against the woman and secondly against Jesus. So in this episode in the Gospel, everybody seems to be ensnared or ensnaring. And the only free person is Jesus. Now, this is a time, I think, when many of us will feel rather trapped too. Over 2 billion people worldwide are in lockdown. We are in this community, and so will many of you be who are watching and taking part with us. But this is a lockdown that for most of us we consent willingly, because it is out of kindness for those whom we do not wish to endanger. We don't want to risk infecting people, and so we accept to be apart in our houses. Grandparents accept to abstain from seeing and touching their grandchildren. But sin is a much more radical entrapment. We find ourselves trapped in destructive patterns of behavior. And if you're imprisoned in a small flat with somebody for a few weeks, you may well see that happening. When the lockdown was lifted in Wuhan, the divorce rate shot up. And the media traps us in our errors and our failures. If once you commit some gross mistake, it will be there forever on the net. You will be forever accused, trapped in your failings. The woman caught in adultery is an adulteress forever. If you happen to kill somebody, and many of us have been tempted often enough, then you are forever a murderer. There's no forgetting in the World Wide Web. We're trapped in what we've done. And so our prayer as we draw near to Holy Week is that we may be set free, that we may be released. As it says in Psalm 124, release us from the snare of the hunter, and we shall be free. And in this extraordinary scene, Jesus releases everybody. First of all, he sets free people who've been trapped in the mob, thirsting for blood. He quietly waits. He writes in the dust. Everything slows down. He invites each person to take their personal responsibility, to assume their own life. Whichever of you is without sin, cast the first stone. Presumably, Our Lady was not around. So he liberates each person from that intoxication of violence. Why beginning with the elders, you might ask? G.K. Chesterton said, children are innocent and love justice, while most of us are wicked and prefer mercy. And then there's the woman. Right until the end, she never says anything. She isn't really recognized as a person. She's just an object to trap Jesus. And then Jesus addresses her, and she speaks for the first time. And it's fascinating that just at the moment that she becomes someone, the word that she speaks is no one. Once all the crowd have become somebody's, then nobody wants to condemn her. Conversation with the Lord, being addressed by the Lord, liberates us into proper personhood. So in this time of lockdown, when many of us are trapped in the walls of our own homes, may the Lord give us a deeper freedom, a freedom from resentment and despair, a freedom from past errors, a freedom for each other. So what was Jesus writing in the sand? We don't know. And that's the point. I think he was probably writing down his verdict, his judgment on each person. And none of us know what that is on another person. We can only know that it is more merciful, more generous than we can ever imagine. As St. John, the author of today's Gospel, said in his first letter, "Your heart may condemn you, but God is greater than your heart."
Deliver your people from the
confession we acclaim. In a similar way, when supper was ended, he took the chalice, and once more giving thanks, gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and drink from it. For this is the chalice of my blood, the blood of the new and everlasting covenant, which will be poured out for you and for many, for the forgiveness of sins. Do this in memory of me." The mystery of faith. Save us, Saviour of the world, for by your cross and resurrection you have set us free. Therefore, as we celebrate the memorial of his death and resurrection, we offer you, Lord, the bread of life and the chalice of salvation, giving thanks that you have held us worthy to be in your presence and minister to you. Humbly we pray that, partaking of the body and blood of Christ, we may be gathered into one by the Holy Spirit.
Remember, Lord, your church spread throughout the world, and bring her to the fullness of charity, together with Francis our Pope and Bernard our Bishop, and all the clergy.
Remember also our brothers and sisters who have fallen asleep in the hope of the resurrection, and all who have died in your mercy. Welcome them into the light of your face. Have mercy on us all, we pray,
peace of the Lord.